They say evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, masquerading as a troubled teenager, waiting for the right moment to strike. This is the story of Cassandra Borg, a story of trust betrayed, kindness exploited, and lives senselessly destroyed. Cassandra Borg, or Cassie as she was often called, was born and raised in Duluth, Georgia. Her early years were anything but stable. With no father figure and a tumultuous household, Cassie grew up in an environment of chaos and neglect. Her mother, Amanda Sterling, struggled to discipline her, and as time went on, it became clear that Cassie was spiraling out of control. By her teenage years, Cassie's behavior was far beyond what anyone might call rebellious. She didn't just push boundaries, she shattered them. She became a regular face in police reports, racking up charges for underage drinking, drug use, shoplifting, and even domestic assault. She skipped school, ran away from home, and surrounded herself with a group of equally reckless friends. For Amanda, managing Cassie became an impossible task. No punishment seemed to work, and Cassie's attitude hardened into one of defiance and entitlement. In a desperate attempt to save her daughter from herself, Amanda made the difficult decision to call on her parents for help. Wendy and Randall Borg were the epitome of loving grandparents. Living in the quiet town of Lawrenceville, Georgia, they had spent decades building a peaceful life centered around family and community. They were well known and well loved by their neighbors, often volunteering their time and offering a helping hand to anyone in need. When Amanda called them, explaining that she could no longer handle Cassie, they didn't hesitate. They believed that with patience and guidance, they could turn their troubled granddaughter's life around. In 2016, Wendy and Randall gained custody of Cassie, and she moved into their home in Lawrenceville. But from the very beginning, it was clear this would not be an easy transition. Cassie made no effort to hide her resentment. She was furious at being uprooted from her life in Duluth, even if that life had been filled with poor choices and bad influences. From day one, she tested her grandparents' limits, challenging their rules and authority at every turn. Wendy and Randall were firm but fair. Their expectations were simple: no staying out late, no drinking or smoking, attend school regularly, and complete homework on time. But to Cassie, even these basic rules felt like a prison sentence. She refused to comply, skipping school and sneaking out at night. She brought her defiance home, clashing with her grandparents in heated arguments that often turned physical. The police were no strangers to the Borg household. Between 2016 and 2017, officers were called to their home more than 30 times. Sometimes, it was the neighbors who called, concerned by the shouting and banging they heard. Other times, it was Wendy or Randall themselves, reporting Cassie for running away or becoming violent. Despite the turmoil, Wendy and Randall never gave up on their granddaughter. They believed she wasn't inherently bad, just a victim of a troubled upbringing. They held on to the hope that, with enough love and support, she could change. But Cassie had no interest in changing. To her, her grandparents were the enemy, standing in the way of the life she wanted. She saw their kindness and patience as weaknesses to exploit, and as her resentment grew, so did the darkness within her. She began spending more time with her boyfriend, Johnny Ryder, a 19-year-old who shared her disdain for authority and her appetite for trouble. Together, they became a toxic force, feeding off each other's anger and rebellion. The breaking point came in the spring of 2017. On April 1st, Cassie ran away once again, leaving Wendy and Randall worried and desperate for her safety. But this time, she wasn't just running away, she was planning something far more sinister. With Johnny by her side, she hatched a plan that would shock even the most hardened investigators. Late that night, after the lights in the Borg home had gone out, Cassie and Johnny made their move. Armed with weapons, they entered the house undetected. Wendy and Randall were upstairs, unaware that the granddaughter they had taken in out of love and hope was about to destroy their lives. In a brutal and senseless attack, Cassie and Johnny ended the lives of the elderly couple who had only ever wanted to help her. But their depravity didn't end there. After the murders, they callously arranged Wendy and Randall's bodies in the bedroom, sealing the room to contain the smell of decomposition. Then, they cleaned themselves up and went downstairs as if nothing had happened. Over the next few days, they stayed in the house, throwing a drug-fueled party while Wendy and Randall's lifeless bodies lay upstairs. Their actions were beyond comprehension, a chilling display of disregard for human life. As the days passed, Wendy and Randall's silence began to raise alarms. Family members who couldn't reach them became concerned and requested a welfare check. When officers arrived at the Borg home, they knocked but received no answer. They left, assuming the couple wasn't home. It wasn't until several days later, after a series of unrelated events, that the truth was uncovered. Cassie and Johnny's crime spree continued as they turned their attention to Johnny's sister and her boyfriend. In a violent altercation, they assaulted the couple with a baseball bat, leaving them badly injured before stealing their car and fleeing the scene. But their luck was running out. The stolen car was traced back to Wendy and Randall, and when officers returned to the Borg home, they made a horrifying discovery. Breaking down the door, they were met with an overwhelming stench. Upstairs in the master bedroom, they found Wendy and Randall's bodies, bearing the marks of a violent and senseless attack. The discovery of Wendy and Randall Borg's bodies shook the Lawrenceville community to its core. The kind, elderly couple who had been pillars of their neighborhood were gone, victims of a brutal crime that no one could have anticipated. As police pieced together the timeline of events, it became clear that their own granddaughter, Cassie, and her boyfriend, Johnny Ryder, were the culprits. Tracking down the pair became a top priority for law enforcement. It didn't take long to locate them. They were hiding in a nearby apartment complex, barricaded in a friend's unit. A tense standoff ensued. Police surrounded the apartment, urging Cassie and Johnny to surrender peacefully. But the pair refused, determined to avoid justice at any cost. After an hour of failed negotiations, officers sent a remote-controlled robot into the apartment to assess the situation. It was then they discovered the pair had barricaded themselves in the bathroom and attempted a shocking act of desperation. They had tried to end their own lives by slashing their wrists with a razor blade. Fortunately, their suicide attempt was unsuccessful. SWAT officers stormed the apartment, arresting Cassie and Johnny and rushing them to a hospital for treatment. The community that had been holding its breath could finally exhale. Two dangerous individuals were now in custody. But the question on everyone's mind remained: how could two young people, barely out of their teens, commit such heinous acts? In the days following their arrest, the truth about what had happened inside the Borg home began to unravel. Under police interrogation, Cassie and Johnny turned on each other, each blaming the other for the murders. But as detectives dug deeper, they uncovered the horrifying reality. This crime had been meticulously planned. Cassie admitted that she and Johnny had plotted the attack for days. Fueled by her hatred for her grandparents' rules and her desire to live life on her own terms, she had decided they needed to die. On the night of the murders, armed with a tire iron, a hammer, a baseball bat, butcher knives, and duct tape, the pair crept into the Borg home. They waited silently in the dark, listening to make sure Wendy and Randall were asleep. Then, without warning, they launched their attack. Johnny struck Randall first, catching the elderly man off guard. Cassie turned her rage on Wendy, dragging her grandmother from her bed, duct taping her and stabbing her repeatedly. In a matter of minutes, the lives of two kind-hearted people were brutally snuffed out. After the murders, Cassie and Johnny's actions were nothing short of chilling. They showed no remorse, instead indulging in a twisted sense of triumph. They ordered takeout, threw a party, and carried on as if nothing had happened. Days later, they moved on to their next victims, Johnny's sister and her boyfriend. It was only after this second attack that law enforcement was able to connect the dots, linking them to Wendy and Randall's murders. The legal process that followed was swift and decisive. Cassie and Johnny were charged with the murders of Wendy and Randall Borg, as well as the assault of Johnny's sister and her boyfriend. Facing overwhelming evidence, the pair ultimately pleaded guilty to all charges, avoiding the death penalty in exchange for life sentences. Under the terms of their plea deal, They would be eligible for parole only after serving 60 years, essentially ensuring they would spend the majority of their lives behind bars. During their sentencing, the judge described the crime as one of the most heinous he had ever encountered. "The heartless and depraved nature of what you did," he said, "leaves no doubt that society must be protected from individuals like you." When given the opportunity to speak, Johnny expressed remorse, claiming he regretted his actions and asking for forgiveness. Cassie, on the other hand, remained silent, tears streaming down her face. Whether she was mourning the loss of her grandparents or the loss of her freedom, no one could say for sure. The fallout from the case was profound. Wendy and Randall's deaths left a void in the Lawrenceville community, and their family struggled to come to terms with the tragedy. Amanda, Cassie's mother, was especially devastated. She had hoped that sending her daughter to live with her grandparents would give her a fresh start. Instead, it had led to an unimaginable nightmare. "I never thought my daughter was capable of something like this," Amanda said in a statement. "I don't know where I went wrong, but I'll carry the weight of this for the rest of my life." As for Cassie and Johnny, their lives were effectively over. Once full of potential, they were now reduced to a cautionary tale, a grim reminder of how unchecked anger and rebellion can spiral into something much darker. Their actions left scars not just on their victims, but on everyone who knew them. Even in prison, they would never escape the shadow of what they had done. The story of Cassandra Borg is a tragic one, filled with missed opportunities, broken relationships, and devastating consequences. It's a story that forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about the nature of evil. Was Cassie born a killer, or did her troubled upbringing set her on this path? Could Wendy and Randall have done more to protect themselves, or were they simply victims of their own kindness? These questions may never have clear answers, but one thing is certain: the lives of Wendy and Randall Borg, and the lives of those they touched, will never be the same. As we reflect on this chilling case, it's a stark reminder of how even the smallest actions can have profound ripple effects. Wendy and Randall wanted nothing more than to help their granddaughter, but their compassion cost them everything. Their story is a testament to the dangers of misplaced trust and the tragic consequences of unchecked rage. Thank you for staying with us through this harrowing tale. If you found this story compelling, please consider subscribing for more deep dives into cases that leave us questioning the nature of humanity. Your support helps us uncover and share these important stories. Until next time, stay safe, take care of one another, and remember to cherish the kindness in your life. It's more precious than we often realize.